What does Maslow's hierarchy of needs have to do with company culture? Can individual well-being be accurately measured? John Starling, founder of Pietential, sheds light on these questions and more.
Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have a very special guest, John Starling, who has a wealth of experience from the entrepreneurial world and also in the company culture space with personal well-being. We're excited to chat with him, and thank you for being with us, John.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
A little bit more about John. John Starling is a veteran entrepreneur of more than 25 years, having advised companies from startups to the Fortune 50 in growth strategy, and advised and coached countless individuals. He is the founder of Pietential, a holistic well-being platform based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which helps people and organizations benchmark, visualize, monitor, and improve their well-being.
So getting started, John, we did a little research, and I know we met at Las Vegas at the HR conference there last month and had some great conversations. I heard from Vince from your team that you are also a country singer, and you told me about the book that you had written. So tell us a little bit more just about you and your life experience.
Oh, geez. It's been quite a life. So yeah, I play country music. I got really lucky. I was playing in bars in Baltimore in 2013, 2014. Then I moved to South Korea for the second time in my life back in 2014, and kept playing over there and played a big show, just me and Sojin Kaya Park, who was my backup singer over there. And we, unbeknownst to us, it was live to about 7 million people around Seoul. Yeah. Yeah. We looked after the show, we looked back, waved goodbye to the crowd, looked back over our shoulder, and there was a control booth, which I didn't even notice, and it said live. So we got signed. We put out 2 albums. One of them I've taken down. The other one is up on iTunes. It's all under my full name, John Patrick Starling, and johnpatrickstarling.com. And original country music. I sing. I play guitar, play harmonica, write the songs. And our big claim to fame was we opened for Weezer at Pennaport in 2015.
Oh my gosh!
So yeah, we had a nice run. It was the first album was really just sort of bluegrass. It was a 9-piece string band, bluegrass, rockabilly, that kind of stuff. The second album, which is still up online, is just a beautiful album of late 60s, early 70s style country ballads called "By the Time This Gets to Nashville, It Won't Matter." And then I also wrote a children's book. It's an illustrated rhyming children's book for kids from about 4 to 104, because it's one of those books that, as you get older, it takes on more and more meaning. And that's called Flight of the Platypus, a story of self-discovery. And I wrote that when the economy was pretty bad, so I've kept it up online for free. Anybody can read it to their kids or for themselves at flightoftheplatypus.com. So yeah, that's
so
a little bit about my life.
Yeah. Man, I'm so glad we needed to add all that to your bio. That's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah.
I think more people should follow your example of just doing something, like taking action and seeing where it goes. And who knows if there are 7 million people watching, and next thing you know, you have some amazing opportunities. That's incredibly special, both on the singing side and the author side. Really, really neat.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, yeah, it was 7 million, not 70. If it was 70,
so, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
So big, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you know, you have to do it without attachment. You know, you make art because you make art because you make art. You know, I've never really been one to do it with any, in Buddhism they call it a gaining idea. I don't have any real gaining idea. I just do what I do, you know.
Love that.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear a little bit more about Pietential and what you're doing there and what kind of led you to this, and about your goal of genuinely making well-being for all. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so boy, I have been coached a lot over the years. From my very first, well, I've always loved mentorship, right? In the military, when I was a carpenter, after the service in my summers, when I was a teacher, studying from other teachers, and when I started my first company back in 1999, a long time ago, I immediately hired a coach, and I've hired a series of coaches over the decades that I've been doing this kind of work, and became a coach, was a management consultant and business coach, and then became a certified professional life coach towards the end of my consulting career. And I got into that because the work that I was doing in strategic planning, honestly, 50% of the time, the plans were not implemented. And the reason is because human beings don't like change. It's really that simple. And so if you want people to embrace change, you have to be in a coaching conversation in order to make them okay with the change that the plan represents for them and for their organizations and for their subordinates, et cetera. So that's how I got into coaching. And I also, along the way, I set up a couple of youth programs. I set up a free MMA school in Baltimore back in 2010. It's a mentoring and martial arts school. So it was a life coaching program on a simple sort of have do be achievement model. So work with the kids monthly. What do you want to have out of life? What are you doing to get it? And then who you being in the matter, right? And that's the coaching part. So that was the core of the program, but the martial arts is what brought them in, right? And then they did volunteer work to pay the tuition. So they would pick up trash with me and the other teachers once a month, and then they got their tuition for free. And then I set up a first of its kind girls rec soccer program in Korea with my daughter. And because in Korea, it was ride or die. You were either going to the Olympics or you didn't get to play soccer if you're a girl. So we changed that. And when we left, there was hundreds and hundreds of girls playing both at her school and in the program. We set up the one at her school, and then we set up a community program as well. So we left it better than we found it. And but somewhere along the line, I just sort of hit the wall. Coaching is amazing because you get to work with people one-on-one, but that's also its downfall, and not just from an economic standpoint, but really from more importantly, just from a net effect standpoint. I went to my coach, Bill Clark of Clark Leadership, and I said, I want to have a bigger effect in my short time left on this planet, however long that is. I want to reach more people. And I grew up very poor. I grew up under the poverty line until I was about 11 when my mother remarried. So, single mom, not a lot of resources, and I've done pretty well. So I want, my goal with Pietential was to make coaching, feedback, mentorship, personal growth accessible to people that otherwise couldn't afford it. So back in, I guess it was 5 years ago, I went to my mentor and told him, you know, what I wanted. And he gave me some encouragement, and I can't even remember specifically what it was, but something, you know, that's coaching. Something opens up in the conversation for you that you didn't see before. And I think I was like, yeah, why not now? You know, quit talking about it and just do it. And so what I did was I reverse engineered Maslow's hierarchy of needs into an online well-being assessment. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and your listeners probably are, it's really a seminal construct to look at what it is to be a human being, regardless of your age or your gender, your culture, your language. It's been proven out pretty well over the last 81 years now since he first published his paper in Psychology Today called A Theory of Human Motivation, which was the root of all this. And what he posited was that every human being has to or has these 5 areas of their well-being, which are your safety and security, your physiology, in reverse order there. So your physiology, now this is the interesting thing. They've been put in order, but they actually weren't in his paper. That's an interesting caveat there. But the way it came down to sort of in the common parlance is that there's this triangle, and in that triangle you have to have your physiology squared away, and your safety and security, and then your sense of love and belonging, and then your sense of esteem, and then you get this little bit of self-actualization, right? And I remember back my first year in college after the military, being in Psych 101 and raising my hand and saying to the professor, yeah, I don't buy it. You know, I get the needs, but I don't get this triangle thing. I think that they're always in and around us. And she agreed, and she said, yeah, actually, that was sort of put onto Maslow, but it wasn't actually in the paper. And he came back later and clarified too. No, it's more of a, I don't want to misquote him, but it's more of sort of a rubric than it is, you know, a ladder. Mm-hmm. So anyway, long story short, reverse engineered that into an online well-being assessment that gives some feedback and observations to help you improve your well-being, and then teamed up with a friend of mine who has spent most of his adult life living off and on in the Himalayas, with the Tibetan monks there in the Himalayas up in northern India, and he developed a whole set of exercises in Pietential, which is called Actualize It, which is personal growth exercises. So all this feedback and all these exercises are algorithmically tied to your scores. So you go on, it takes about 3 minutes. You take Pietential, spits out a pie chart, shows you your current well-being, and then you can then it gives you feedback instantly, and then it gives you exercises to do to improve it, and then you can log back in anytime, and it starts to plot your well-being over time in a line graph. So we've sort of gamified well-being, and it's all free. That was my vision, was to make it free for anybody in the world, and it is free for individual users. And we have to have a business model to underwrite our good work in this world, so we license it to organizations, and then they can use the dashboard feature to monitor the well-being of their people. So long diatribe there. Sorry.
Oh, not at all. I think that's amazing. And I just backtracking a little bit, what you were saying about, you know, where you started from, you had so much potential that you were able to tap. And it sounds like you see that in so many people. Like if you were able to come from below poverty to where you are now, then there's so many people out there that can explore not only, you know, how much money they can earn, but their potential with talents, soccer, you know. I mean, our daughter, she just finished her soccer season, and it's just for fun, you know, and I can't imagine it if her only option was to like go all the way to the Olympics. But
yeah, right. Yeah, that's people tell me that that's my gift, is that I have an ability to see what people can become. I guess just because I've seen it in myself. Now that at times has been a curse too, because I had to learn from my mentor, from Bill. I had to learn the hard way on some bad hires over the years when I used to own management consulting firms, in accepting people for who they are. You know, sometimes it's a round peg in a square hole, and that's what it is. And no matter how much, you know, I personally believe in human growth and transformation, you know, as the old again, back to Buddhism. In Buddhism, they say you can't polish a stone and make it into a diamond.
Yeah.
You know,
Very powerful.
it's a stone.
Yep.
Sometimes that's
what you said about change being so difficult for humans, that's a theme that we've discussed many times in this podcast, and just what things we can implement that allow that change to move forward. And it seems to always be back to, like you said, having the buy-in from those who really have the ability to implement that change, and having a coach, I think, is crucial to that.
Yeah, and I would add to that that the reticence to change and the pain and anguish and gnashing of the teeth that goes with it is really bound up in one thing, and that's attachment. You know, that you know, we're attached to, well, we've always done it this way, right? Or we're attached to, well, I put that EAP in. I spent 3 years of my life putting that EAP in, but it doesn't work. You know, it's got 17% adoption. And for the 17% of your people that are using it, nobody really knows what parts of it are moving margin on well-being and which parts aren't. It's one of the things that Pietential solves, that you can use it to measure the efficacy of your EAP. But the root of all that is attachment. And if people can detach their ego from the outcome, everything works a lot better. You know,
continually changing and implementing is how humans have gotten this far. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, John, I'm personally a pretty big enthusiast of Maslow's hierarchy and his approach as well, and those different needs that we have as humans. We're seeking for need fulfillment, and you know, there's a measure of that can be solved with monetary resources, like physiological needs, being able to afford food and shelter and, you know, clothing to be protected. But then there's other needs that are above that, like the belongingness and love and esteem needs that require, you know, growth and interaction, human interaction with other people. So I love it when I learned about Pietential and what you were doing last month in Vegas. I was so excited for this conversation. I think a lot of our listeners here, we've got HR leaders, people leaders, executives that are trying to find ways to prioritize their people, which is prioritizing profits. So maybe speak to us from your perspective a little bit about, from the business stance, what is the business case for caring about your people's well-being?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the business case is that what businesses measure is performance, right? So, you know, KPIs, MBOs, outcomes. If your company runs on EOS, it's rocks. You know, balanced scorecards, Six Sigma. You know, there's all these different ways of measuring progress in organizations, and what they're trying to measure is performance. Performance is rooted in well-being, period, full stop. And that's at the individual level, that's at the team level, that's at the the large group level, that's at the enterprise level. So what's really interesting, and we just sort of fell into this market, right? Like we had no intention of developing an HR tech tool. We wanted to develop something that could be used around the world by individuals, and then we moved into NGOs who are using the tool in developing countries through social workers to measure the efficacy of the programs that they're putting in place. And like I said, well, gee, the data's getting expensive. We have to have a business model to underwrite this. So that's how we got into being an HR tech tool. But what we've learned in the short time that we've been in the commercial market, the last 6 months really, pardon me, is that we think the market missed it. We think they just flat missed it. They're measuring things like satisfaction and engagement and, all this crap, and all of that. Look at anything that any of these tools are measuring, and I will bet you lunch next time I see you, Matt, and you can bring your lovely wife with you. It's rooted in well-being, but nobody's measuring well-being. Gallup is probably the closest proxy, but they measure workplace well-being as if that when you go to work, suddenly you have a completely different well-being than when at home. Your well-being is your well-being is your well-being. That's why we say we measure holistic well-being. The things that we're discovering through the use of this tool, both in the corporate world and through our work in the developing world, is just stunning. And in both cases, it's giving people the ability to make more informed decisions in order to better deploy their resources. So that to me is just enormous. It's fundamentally changing the way NGOs and NPOs are looking at themselves, because now they can prove the efficacy of their programs and go back to their funders the following year and say, hey, this is why you should fund us again. We use the tool to measure women who have been trafficked and who went into a healing and recovery program. We measured them before, during, and after, and the women had X% gain in safety and security, belonging, and self-esteem, and that's why you should fund us again next year, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's very powerful.
It's really powerful. But one of the things I want to know, there's a couple of things. Sorry to go on so much, but there's a couple of things that if I could just snap my fingers, these are the things that I want to know. On the developing world side, I've been all around the world, right? And I've been to Cambodia 3 times. And every time I go there, I'm approached by children with distended bellies. Obviously, they have parasites and worms, with rickets, right? Sometimes with polio. There's still leprosy in Cambodia, right? So as Westerners from a very wealthy country, we sort of have it, I always hear, oh, those poor people, they don't have much, but they're so happy. They're so much happier than we are. Maybe. Up until the point where you have worms and rickets.
Yeah.
Right? And you're malnourished and you're going out begging for money to give your father so he doesn't beat you. Right? So where's the line? That's one of the things I want to discover with this tool. And then on the, I have a daughter going off to college, and one of the things I really want out of this tool, I want Pietential used in every college in the United States. And I want them to benchmark the well-being of the students when they come in, student, faculty, staff, every year when people return to school. And God forbid, if there's a mass shooting, what you're going to see is safety, belonging, security. They will go off a cliff. That's just common sense. The question is, when has well-being returned to the benchmark, the pre-event benchmark? Same thing with a company. If you have a workplace violence incident, which our country unfortunately is famous around the world for, there's a workplace violence incident, everybody in that division, etc., their feeling of safety, security, belonging is going to go off of a cliff. When has it returned to its original benchmark? And therefore, when can HR and the C-suite reasonably expect performance, remember performance, to return to normal? Those are the things that I want to know out of this tool. And it's going to take time, putting more lives on the system every day, and we'll see,
I think, kind of along those lines of being able to measure and see that correlation, I think you talked about how the market got it wrong in some areas. I think the HR world and the business world has a few other things wrong. For example, we talk about something called the employee life cycle when someone's hired and when they leave the company. Employee life cycle. We're not tracking when someone's born and when they die. It's actually the employment life cycle. We're mapping the beginning and ending of the employment relationship to a company. And I think, talking about the wellness of these team members as part of that employment relationship definitely has a very obvious ROI, as you talked about, because when people are in a better state, they do better work. Now, I'm curious, just kind of as a follow-up, I want to kind of play the devil's advocate on one question here. Sure. You gave some incredible examples of how tracking wellness in different use cases can be really powerful. However, in the workplace setting, what right does the employer have to see some of that data? Is it anonymized? Is it required? Can an employee opt out of participating if their company was participating in ongoing employment wellness initiatives? Because obviously there's value to the person knowing their own state and seeing that tracked over time. But some people will say, well, my employer's big brother, I don't want them knowing all of this about me and all that kind of stuff. And maybe they have a right to know how you perform at work, but as you said, we're holistic people. It's not just how we are at work. So maybe talk to me a little bit about your opinion there of
we've set it up so the employee can opt in or out with a toggle button on their dashboard. So if they opt out, then their data is still in the system, anonymized and aggregated into a pie chart. So let's say the company has 10,000 employees, right? You're a dot somewhere in that pie chart, but it's, where, who, it's all anonymized and aggregated. If the employee wants HR or counseling or coaching, etc., the powers that be in the organization that have administrative rights, if they want their well-being to be seen, and you can imagine a female employee in a toxic work environment, a group of female employees in a toxic work environment may want theirs to be seen and therefore would turn it on. Now, we've also set up, as a quick aside, we've recently put in a new feature called Wellbeing Alerts. So for those people who have decided that they do want their information shared with their employer, they can negotiate with the employer, or the employer can set, or they can set a threshold that if their well-being or any element of their well-being dips below a certain numerical value, HR gets an alert in their dashboard. So you can see where if several people had that, and new leadership comes into an office and suddenly bells are going off. Okay, maybe this is just, a honeymoon period ending, but maybe it's toxic leadership. You move that leader to another area and the same thing happens. You may have identified a toxic leader. Also, it could be used for HR could set up an overall threshold on belonging, that at a certain point, if belonging of the total population is going down, or any cohort, because you can build cohorts, demographic cohorts inside of the system, then that HR wants to know, because maybe that's a sign of quiet quitting or a mass resignation coming that could put a company under. So it's really valuable intelligence. Now, on the flip side, if the company wants to override, so we leave it up to the employee, but the company does have a master switch where they can override and say, we need to see the well-being of everybody. That's between the company and their legal counsel and the employees. And if the employees have representation through a union, like a pilots union or something, that's for them to sort out. We give them the option that the company can see everything, and that's, you know, part of the contract. Or depending on what and I'm going to use the word contract here with a small c, like a social contract, what the values contract is within the organization, they can determine them themselves. Doesn't matter to us. But even if all 10,000 employees say, no, we don't want the company, like I have a friend who spent a lot of time in the food industry, in fine dining, and in corporate fine dining, restaurants owned by, you know, by big Wall Street money, basically. And it's a very adversarial relationship. They have a union and all this, very adversarial relationship. In that particular case, all the employees at a restaurant, for example, may not want their individual well-being shown, but their aggregate well-being, anonymized, would be in the data visualizations that Pietential creates. You can see where some organizations may demand it. We don't have an airline yet as a client, but I could see where this would be an important data point for airline pilots, right? We've spoken to, I'm a veteran, and we've spoken to a group with the U.S. Army that deals in force readiness, right? So you can see where the 101st and the 82nd both come off at deployments. This could be a very valuable data point as to who's ready to deploy again. Not the only data point, but an important one.
Wow, so many use cases that I wouldn't have even thought of all those things. It's amazing. And I just wanted to ask, you've had so much experience coaching executives. Do you have anything that has just surprised you during that time?
Outside of Pietential, you mean, right?
Yeah, or insight. Just
yeah. Well, I quit coaching so I could go all in with Pietential. Every once in a while, somebody will hit me up, and you know, if I have time, I'll talk to them. But I usually refer it out now. I will tell you, you know, as you are a woman, I will tell you that the common thing that I saw across almost every successful woman in business that I've coached is a desperate, deep feeling of inadequacy, that I am not enough. And that drives them to be super hyper achievers. And often our great strength is also our great weakness. You know, it's really tough on these women going through life, putting on a brave face and presenting as strong and confident, capable, which they are. But when you get down to it, often the genesis of it is insecurity and a feeling of inadequacy. You know, much like with me, it's not just women. You know, we tend to overcompensate. You know, for me, I was a small kid. I didn't finish growing until like probably the end of my first year in the Air Force, right? But I was a small kid, no money, no dad, asthma, all this kind of stuff. And, you know, I went on later in life to, you know, carry an M60 for, you know, machine gun for a living, and got a couple of black belts, and have, you know, worked as a private investigator and all kinds of craziness. You know, it's like all this tough guy stuff that where does that come from? Well, that comes from fear, right? That's fear-based. So it's really interesting. You know, they say that the reason you hire a top coach or a top management consultant is to figure out what the real issue is, because it's never what's presented, right? We're all masters of putting up some sort of artifice. You know, the Japanese say that everyone has three faces: the face that you show the world, the face that you show your close friends and family, and the face that you don't show anybody. And where change really comes from is being able to be vulnerable to the point where you show that face to someone that you can trust, whether that's, you know, your pastor or your coach or a dear friend who loves you enough to be objective, right? And that's one of the reasons that Pietential is powerful, because it's a place where you can be anonymous and authentic and get some objective feedback.
Well, I think, you know, for everyone listening, you are a people leader, you are an HR leader, you're an executive, you know, you owe it to yourself to improve your own well-being. And even if you just cared about the profitability of your own company, you owe it to the performance, that increase that you can have by improving your own well-being and being more aware of that. And for your team members, you know, it's important to have those conversations about how they are and what you can do to support them and their growth. Yeah. So this is a great resource.
Matt, when I was coaching companies, I would always tell them, if you want to have a bigger company, which, you know, bigger could be people or revenue or whatever, you want to have a bigger company, have a bigger conversation inside of the company. And that conversation starts with yourself, right? So there's certain organizations that are high-performing organizations where the leadership cares about well-being and is really focused on that, and they see the results inside of the organization, and some don't. One of the questions that we get, which sort of jives with that real quick, is how often should we send out the assessment? And you can do it monthly, weekly, daily, quarterly, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Whatever your organization's normal assessment or survey pace is, tack it on with that, you know. But the cool thing is, Pietential is also an employee benefit. So just leave it on, leave the door open, because when somebody's getting ready to go in, you know, to the night shift at 11 p.m., they might want to sit down and do a personal growth exercise, or they come off of a hard shift or whatever, they may want to check in. So you just leave it on, and you've got real-time information, which is in EES, you know, for lack of a better term, it's an employee engagement system, that word again, for the administrators, but it's in EXS, it's an employee experience system. It's a supplemental benefit for the employees. So neat stuff, huh?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And we really appreciate all of your insights today, John. And for everybody listening, make sure to subscribe and leave a review of the podcast as well, and check out the link about Pietential. So we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm grateful for you. You're awesome. You're doing good work in the world, and just keep it up.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit Podcast, and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mobrium.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mobrium.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.